There is a specific kind of quiet that settles inside a person who loved someone with a narcissistic heart, loved them completely, loved them without holding anything back. It is not the calm kind of quiet. It is not peace. It is the silence that comes after you have handed over every ounce of patience you had, every bit of loyalty, every gentle word you whispered at 3 a.m. when nobody else could see, every sacrifice you made that no one ever acknowledged. And then you watch the very person you love most reach inside your chest and shatter something that was never supposed to be shattered in the first place. If you have ever found yourself sitting completely alone in a quiet room, staring at nothing in particular, feeling like a total stranger inside your own skin, asking yourself over and over how someone you protected with everything you had could turn around and hurt you so effortlessly, so casually, then what follows is going to reach a part of you that has been waiting a long, long time to finally feel understood. Because what happens inside a person after a narcissist destroys someone who gave them their whole heart is not some random accident. It is not a sign of weakness. It is not you being overly dramatic or blowing things out of proportion. It is a quiet internal earthquake, and almost nobody ever talks honestly about what actually happens inside the soul of the person left standing in the rubble afterward. Maybe you have replayed the same conversation in your head 100 different times, searching for the exact sentence where everything started to go wrong, as if finding that one moment would somehow give you permission to stop hurting. Maybe you have laid awake at 2 a.m. trying to figure out what you could have done differently, what version of yourself might have been enough to make them stay soft, to make them stay kind, to make them stay the person you fell for in the beginning. And maybe, somewhere underneath all of that searching, there is a quiet fear that the answer is simply that nothing you could have done would have changed anything at all, because the problem was never actually you. Before going any further, if you are someone who has lived through emotional manipulation, silent forms of abuse, or the slow, grinding erosion of your sense of self inside a relationship that drained every bit of life out of you, take a second right now and subscribe to this channel. This space exists for people who genuinely want to understand narcissistic behavior, emotional manipulation, healing, self-worth, and psychological freedom on a level that goes far past the surface-level advice you find everywhere else. You deserve to finally understand what actually happened to you. Subscribing is one of the smallest acts of self-respect you can offer yourself today, and it quietly tells the part of you that has felt silenced for years that somebody out there is actually listening. The first thing that happens when a narcissist wounds the person who poured everything into them is something that is almost impossible to explain to anyone who has never lived through it themselves. It is a kind of emotional shutdown that does not show up on the outside, not to the rest of the world anyway. You still look completely normal. You still smile politely at your coworkers. You still pick up the phone when it rings. You still cook dinner, still go to work, still drive your car, still function like a regular person. But somewhere deep inside, something has gone strangely, unnervingly quiet. There is a heaviness sitting behind your eyes that feels far older than your actual age. You start to feel like a house with every light still switched on, but with absolutely nobody living inside anymore. This is what happens once the nervous system gets pushed past the boundary of what normal grief looks like. You are not just sad. You are not simply heartbroken. You are emotionally depleted in a way that sleep alone cannot repair, because this particular exhaustion does not come from the body. It comes from years spent holding your breath around someone whose moods you had to constantly predict just to feel safe. You spent so long managing somebody else's emotional weather that you forgot you were even allowed to have feelings of your own. And now, in the quiet aftermath, your soul is finally exhaling for what feels like the first time in years. And strangely enough, that exhale feels like falling apart. People around you may not understand why you seem fine on the surface while something inside you feels completely hollowed out. They will tell you that time heals everything, that you will feel better soon, that you just need to keep busy and move forward. And you will nod along and thank them for their concern, because it is easier than explaining that this is not an ordinary heartbreak. This is your entire nervous system recalibrating after years of living in a low-grade state of alert, always scanning the room for a shift in tone, always bracing for the next unpredictable reaction. Nobody prepares you for how exhausting it is to simply exist in a body that has forgotten what safety actually feels like. The second thing that happens is a slow, devastating realization creeping in. The understanding that what you lived through was never actually love. not in the way you originally understood the word. This is one of the most painful awakenings a human being can ever go through because it is not simply the loss of a person. It is the loss of an entire story you believed about your own life. You start looking back at moments you once treasured, and slowly you begin to see them in a completely different light. The kindness had strings attached. The affection only showed up on their schedule. The closeness only existed whenever you were useful to them in some way. The connection you fought so hard to hold together was mostly being held up by your own effort, almost entirely alone. And when that truth finally lands, it does not arrive like a sudden clap of thunder. It creeps in like a slow-moving tide, washing over memory after memory until you find yourself standing in the wreckage of years you can never get back. You are not losing your mind for grieving someone who is still walking around, still alive. You are grieving the version of them that you believed in with your whole heart. You are grieving the future you built inside your own imagination. You are grieving the person you used to be before you ever met them, the version of you who still trusted people easily, who still believed deep down that the world was fundamentally a safe place. The third thing that happens is the trauma bond itself starts to come undone. And this is where things get genuinely strange from a psychological standpoint. For so long, your nervous system had been conditioned to crave their approval, their attention, their brief flashes of warmth. The brain naturally learns to chase unpredictable rewards the exact same way it learns to chase anything inconsistent, and that chase becomes literally wired into your body over time. So when the relationship finally ends, or when something inside you shifts and finally breaks open, you do not feel instantly free. Instead, you feel withdrawal symptoms. You feel yourself being pulled back toward the very person who hurt you, and you cannot fully understand why that is happening. Think about how a slot machine works, how it hooks people not through constant wins, but through the unpredictability of never knowing when the next win might come. That uncertainty is exactly what kept you glued to the relationship long after logic told you to walk away. The good moments, however rare they became, felt more intense precisely because you never knew when they would arrive again. Your brain clung to those unpredictable flashes of affection the same way it would cling to any reward it could not reliably predict. And that is precisely what made the bond so difficult to break, even once you consciously understood the relationship was hurting you. You might even feel embarrassed or ashamed about missing them. But please really hear this part clearly. Missing someone who hurt you deeply is not proof that the relationship was real or healthy. It is proof that your body was trained to associate them with your own survival. That is not love. That is simply biology reacting to prolonged emotional danger. And the moment you truly understand this on a deep level, the spell slowly starts to weaken. Painfully at first, but permanently in the end. This is why so many people find themselves reaching for the phone at their lowest moments, wanting to send a message they know they will regret, wanting just one more conversation, one more small hit of familiar attention. It is not a character flaw. It is a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Understanding the biology behind the craving does not make it disappear overnight, but it does take away some of the shame attached to it. You are not weak for struggling with withdrawal. You are human, and you are healing from something that rewired the way your brain processes comfort and danger at the exact same time. The fourth thing that happens is something almost nobody ever warns you about ahead of time. Your entire sense of identity begins to feel foreign to you, like clothing that no longer fits your body properly. You spent so long shrinking yourself down, softening your own opinions, hiding your real needs, and molding yourself around their constantly shifting moods that once the relationship finally fractures, you genuinely do not know who you are anymore. You sit alone with yourself and realize you do not even know what you actually like anymore. You do not know what kind of music genuinely moves you. You do not know what you would even choose to do on a completely free Saturday if nobody else were watching or judging. You do not know what your own laugh even sounds like when it is not being performed for someone else's benefit. This is identity loss, and it is one of the deepest wounds that narcissistic relationships leave behind because the price of staying in their orbit was the slow, steady erosion of your own individual self. You were not simply loving them. You were translating yourself into a language they would find tolerable. And now that this exhausting translation process has finally stopped, you have to relearn how to speak as yourself again. And that process takes real time. And that is perfectly okay. It can feel disorienting to stand in front of your own closet and realize you do not know what you actually want to wear anymore, because for so long your choices were filtered through the lens of what would please them, what would avoid criticism, what would keep the peace for one more day. It can feel strange to sit in a restaurant and genuinely struggle to decide what you want to order, because you spent so many years deferring, softening, adjusting. This is not a small thing to rebuild. Rediscovering your own preferences, your own opinions, your own voice is a slow and sometimes clumsy process, and there is no shame in feeling awkward as you relearn how to simply be yourself without asking permission first. If any of this is reaching something deep inside you right now, if any part of what you are hearing feels like it was pulled directly out of your own mind, take a slow breath and stay with this. And if you have not done so yet, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Not for my sake, but for the part of you that has spent years being told you were too sensitive, too much, too dramatic, or somehow never quite enough. This channel exists so that specific part of you can finally rest, finally learn something true, and finally begin to heal. Every single video here is meant to be a quiet companion for the long journey back to yourself. You do not have to walk that road completely alone. The fifth thing that happens is something the narcissist never sees coming, and it is one of the most quietly powerful shifts a human being can ever go through. You simply stop reacting. All those emotional outbursts you used to have, the desperate attempts to finally be understood, the late-night messages trying to explain your pain using slightly different words each time, hoping that maybe this time it would actually land, all of that gradually slows down and eventually stops completely. Not because you have stopped feeling things, you still feel absolutely everything, but something inside you has finally accepted that they were never actually going to understand. Because truly understanding you would require them to admit something about themselves that they simply cannot afford to face. And within that quiet acceptance, a strange sense of calm settles over you. This is the exact moment the narcissist begins to sense they are losing control. Because for years, your emotional reactions were the fuel that kept everything running. Your tears were proof in their mind of their power over you. Your anger was evidence that you still cared enough to keep fighting for the relationship. The moment you go quiet, genuinely quiet, not as some strategic move, but as the natural result of an internal shift, they sense it almost immediately, even from a distance. And this is often when many of them suddenly return, with apologies that somehow sound rehearsed, with sudden bursts of warmth, with promises that feel hauntingly familiar, because they are not actually coming back for you. They are coming back for the version of you that used to come running the moment they called. And the most powerful thing you can possibly do in that moment is recognize that the person they are hoping to get back no longer exists inside you anymore. The sixth thing that happens is the deepest shift of all, and also the most transformative. You start to feel an emotional emptiness that genuinely frightens you at first, because you mistake it for depression or complete hopelessness. But this particular emptiness is not death. It is space. It is the silence of a soul that has finally been given room to breathe again. For so long, every single corner of your inner world was occupied by them. By their voice, by their constant needs, by your ongoing fear of disappointing them, by that steady low hum of anxiety that lived permanently in your chest. And now suddenly, all those corners sit empty. And inside that emptiness, something new slowly begins to grow, almost shyly at first, like a flower pushing its way up through cracked concrete. You start remembering small things about yourself again, a song you used to genuinely love, a dream you used to hold on to, a version of yourself that existed long before you learned to apologize constantly for simply taking up space in the world. This is the true beginning of rebuilding your self-worth, and it does not arrive all at once in one dramatic moment. It arrives instead in small, sacred moments scattered here and there. The first time you eat a meal in complete peace without checking your phone every few seconds. The first time you say no to something without feeling the need to explain yourself. The first time you catch your own reflection in a mirror and feel something other than disappointment staring back at you. These moments are not small at all. They are genuinely revolutionary. You might notice it in the way you start speaking to yourself when you make a small mistake, catching the old harsh voice before it fully forms and replacing it with something gentler. You might notice it in the way a friend's kindness no longer feels suspicious, no longer makes you brace for the catch that used to always come afterward. You might notice it the first time someone treats you well, and your immediate reaction is not to wonder what they want from you, but simply to receive the kindness for what it is. Each of these moments is a small brick being laid back into the foundation of who you are, and over time, that foundation becomes solid enough to stand on again. And here is something almost nobody ever tells you honestly. The narcissist does feel something when they lose a person who truly, genuinely loved them. It is nothing close to the deep, soul-shaking grief that you feel. It is something colder, far more disorienting, more confusing for them. They feel the loss of their supply running out. They feel a disturbance in their usual pattern. They feel a kind of emptiness they cannot even name for themselves. And because they cannot name it, they can never actually heal from it either. Some of them will reach back out years down the road, often right when their next relationship starts falling apart on them, often when life has finally stripped away whatever masks they had been wearing all along. They will say things that sound like genuine regret. They will hint at having changed, and you will have to decide in that exact moment whether the peace you have carefully built for yourself is worth more than the closure you once desperately begged for. Most of the time, the honest truth is this: you do not actually need their apology in order to be free. You only believe that you did. Real freedom is the moment you realize their words can no longer reach that place inside you that used to bleed every time they spoke. You might notice something else too as your healing deepens over time. You start looking at yourself with a softness that you used to reserve exclusively for them. You begin to understand that all the love you poured into someone who was never capable of receiving it properly was not wasted at all. It was proof. Proof that you are capable of a depth of love that most people never even come close to touching in their entire lives. Proof that the actual problem was never that you loved too intensely. The real problem was that you gave that love to someone who treated it like a burden or an inconvenience. And now that exact same love, that vast, generous, uncommon love, is finally turning its attention toward the only person who has genuinely been there through every single silent, painful night. You, the one who survived it all. The one who stayed alive even when simply staying alive felt nearly impossible some days. The person who is right now hearing these words and quietly nodding along because something inside you is finally being named out loud for the very first time. If what you are hearing is touching something real and raw inside you, this is the moment to make a decision your future self will genuinely thank you for. Subscribe to this channel and stay close to this kind of honest truth. Not because anything outside of yourself is going to be the thing that saves you, but because surrounding yourself with voices that genuinely reflect your own awakening is one of the most powerful things a person can do for themselves. Healing was never meant to be a single dramatic event. It is 1,000 small acts of choosing yourself over and over again, in rooms that nobody else will ever even see. Here is a truth that very few people will ever tell you honestly. The narcissist did not break you. They revealed you. They revealed just how much you are capable of enduring. They revealed your loyalty, your patience, the sheer depth of your character, your refusal to give up on someone you genuinely believed in. Those particular qualities were never actually the problem. The real problem was the soil you happened to plant them in. And now, finally, you are learning how to plant yourself somewhere your roots can actually take hold and grow properly. You are learning that real love should never feel like being under constant surveillance. Genuine connection should never feel like you are walking across broken glass. Affection should never feel like some reward you have to painstakingly earn through perfect behavior every single day. You are slowly learning that the relationships truly meant for you will never require the destruction of who you fundamentally are as a person. There will still be difficult nights ahead. There will still be moments when some old memory suddenly surfaces out of nowhere and your chest tightens for reasons you cannot fully explain even to yourself. There will still be days where you genuinely wonder if you imagined the whole thing, if it was really as painful as you remember it being. This is completely normal. This is simply your mind trying to make sense of what happened in the only way it actually knows how to process things. But every single time you choose not to go back, every time you choose your own peace over their chaos, every time you allow yourself to actually feel something instead of numbing it away, you are healing. You are rebuilding the home inside yourself that was burned to the ground by someone who never once deserved to hold the keys to it in the first place. And one day, and honestly, that day is closer than you probably think right now, you will catch yourself in some completely ordinary moment. Maybe you will be pouring yourself a warm cup of something. Maybe you will be walking down some familiar street. Maybe you will just be sitting quietly by a window somewhere, and you will suddenly realize that you have not actually thought about them in days. The grip they once had is gone. the ghost of them is gone too. That version of you that was on your knees, begging to be loved properly by someone who was simply never capable of it, that version of you is gone as well. In her place, in his place, stands someone quieter now, someone genuinely stronger, someone slower to trust again, but someone far deeper in love with life itself. Someone who now knows exactly what they will never tolerate again in their life. Someone who has finally learned that being chosen is not remotely the same thing as being truly cherished. And being needed by someone is not the same thing as actually being loved by them. That person is exactly who you are becoming right now, in this very moment as you take in these words. Even as you sit with whatever pain you are still carrying, understand that this pain is not your final destination. It is your initiation into something greater. And that very same heart that was broken wide open by someone who could not love you properly is the same heart that will, one day, come to know a love so steady, so safe, so completely honest, that you will look back on this entire chapter of your life and finally truly understand. You will look back and see all of it clearly. The version of you who stayed too long hoping things would change. The version of you who made excuses for behavior that never should have been excused. The version of you who believed that loving someone hard enough could somehow fix what was broken in them. And instead of judging that version of yourself, you will feel a strange tenderness toward her, toward him, because you will finally understand that person was doing the very best they could with the information and the hope they had at the time. Compassion for your past self is one of the quiet, unexpected gifts that healing eventually brings. You will also come to understand something that once felt impossible to believe, that walking away from someone was not the tragedy you thought it was going to be. The real tragedy would have been staying, shrinking further, disappearing a little more each year until there was nothing left of you to recognize. Leaving or being left and then choosing to rebuild instead of collapsing, that is not the sad ending to your story. That is the turning point where your story actually begins to belong to you again. You were never too much. You were never the actual problem here. You were simply a soul who loved deeply in a place that was never capable of holding all of that love. And now, at long last, you are finally coming home to yourself. So, if you are still in the thick of it right now, still feeling the weight of nights that seem to stretch on forever, still catching yourself reaching for a phone you know you should put down, know that none of this makes you broken. It makes you someone who loved with their whole chest. And that is not a flaw to be corrected. It is a strength that simply needs to be redirected, pointed inward for once, toward the person who has been waiting patiently this entire time for you to finally come back to yourself. Keep going. Keep choosing yourself, even on the days when it feels small and unremarkable, especially on those days, because that is exactly where real healing quietly lives. In the ordinary moments nobody else will ever see, in the quiet decision to keep showing up for yourself again and again until one day it no longer feels like a decision at all. It simply feels like who you are.